everyone. I'm Jeff Hollinger from 11 Alive News here in Atlanta, and welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk-Young debate series from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the general election debate among candidates for the state school superintendent. Let's meet the candidates for this debate. They are in alphabetical order. Alisha Searcy, a Democrat, is an educator, formerly served in the Georgia House of Representatives. Richard Woods, a Republican, is the incumbent state school superintendent in the state of Georgia. Let's meet our panelists. Jeff Ami is a reporter covering government, politics, and education for the AP, the Associated Press. And Nicole Carr covers criminal justice and racial inequity for ProPublica. For complete rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org/debates. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by each panelist. Candidates have 60 seconds to answer each question. And Jeff Ami, you get the first question to Alisha Searcy.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for joining us. Some Democrats are saying that you're a supporter of charter schools as well as a failed proposal to let the state take over some public schools, undermine support for traditional public schools, and make you an outlier in your party. Is your party trying to undermine you?
First of all, it's important for me to point out that I won all 159 counties in my Democratic primary. And so I think it's important to note that I have a lot of support from my party, and I'm proud to have that. But more important than that, I'm running for state school superintendent because I want to represent all of the children of Georgia. And I believe it's part of the problem that we spend time talking about politics and not what's best for children. I'm a proud supporter of public school choice. As a parent of 3 school-age children, I know more than anyone else what's best for my children, and I believe that parents should have that option. I was not in the legislature during 2015 when the other bill that's being referenced was passed, and so I can't speak to that at all. What I do want to focus on is what's best for children and how the 3 in my household and the 1.7 million children in Georgia have access to a high-quality education. They've not had that for the last 8 years, and it's time for that to change.
Nicole Carr, your turn to ask a question to Richard Woods.
Superintendent Woods, in the spring of 2021, we began to see lawmakers in various states craft legislation to address the teaching of so-called divisive concepts. The State Board of Education, under your leadership, even voted on a resolution tied to the concept that isn't taught in K through 12, critical race theory, and declared that Georgia is not a racist state. We now have a ban on the teaching of those concepts, with the law largely focused on how we grapple with race and ethnicity. What specifically do you consider a divisive curriculum concept? And what do you say to educators who are worried the policies that are crafted in the districts aren't clear enough to let them know where the line is and how they'll cross that?
Well, I think as we look at what we've experienced in Georgia on this issue, when you look at divisive concepts, I think it's any time that we as educators try to infuse our opinions, our thoughts, to coerce, students into believing something without having good critical debate and sound thinking with that. As we look at the expectations that we have within the state of Georgia, we teach our standards. And for our individuals, as we look at our young people, we need to make sure we're teaching our standards. That does not mean we do not shy away from controversial topics. If you look at our standards, we do talk about, the Middle Passage, slavery at various times in U.S. history and around the world. Thinking about the Trail of Tears, Jim Crow, segregation. These are all things we do not shy away from. It's very important that we do teach the authentic history of our nation, of our world, so that we can be better critical thinkers. And as the saying says, we don't want to repeat what we have done in the past, so we have to learn from that. And we are doing that in Georgia. It is something we are working with our district to make
sure. All right, I've got to interrupt you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you.
Jeff, your question for Richard, please.
Yes, Superintendent Woods. You've consistently pushed for less standardized testing and less weight to be put on test results. If federal officials would agree, should Georgia abolish all standardized testing? Do you see the test as having any value?
I think as we look, testing is something we do in Georgia, do in education. As a teacher, I mean, I was in charge of making sure that I tested my students, whether that was in classroom design or either, I guess, what we used to have the CRCT at that time. So there is a place for testing. I think as we look at that, we have to evaluate the purpose. For myself, it is trying to make sure that we're able to move kids forward, to see where they are at and push them to the level they need to be accomplished learners and good citizens and well-rounded individuals that have a wonderful education so that they can step into success. Right now, we will continue to make modifications of milestones. We do have to have that according to law with the federal government, but we have reduced the testing itself. We've seen the largest reduction of mandated testing in our state's history. And so as we continue to move forward, we're going to push that and make sure that we're evaluating our kids. We actually have something called Beacon presently, in which now each district can have a formative test that is aligned with our standards.
Nicole, you get the final question in this round for Alisha Searcy.
Ms. Searcy, you'd mentioned a politicized environment when we're talking K through 12 education. Well, what issue do you believe is the most politicized right now, and how would you like to see that issue handled?
I think education as a whole has been politicized. When I think about teachers in particular, you just asked the question about CRT. Teachers in our state are frustrated. They feel unheard and unseen. And the last thing they needed was a policy passed by the state superintendent and now a law passed in the legislature that further demonizes, disrespects teachers, and ties their hand from teaching the very things that they've been trained to do. And so when we talk about funding, when we talk about banning books, something else that this superintendent has advocated for, we keep the focus away from the things that we need to be talking about, like the fact that only 30% of our fourth graders are reading on grade level. We're not talking about the things that happen in my household, where we have conversations about how important it is to keep our children safe in schools. And so as a mom, as an educator, and as a former state legislator, I want to take politics out of education. I want to focus on the 1.7 million students in Georgia, 3 of them in my household, who deserve to have a quality public education, and adults who are around them that want to focus on them and not politics.
That concludes the first round of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question to their opponent. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond. And the candidate who asks the question will have 30 seconds for a rebuttal by random selection. Richard Woods, you may ask the first question.
Okay, thank you. As a member of the General Assembly and during the campaign season, you've addressed issues or said you would like to address issues such as school safety, teacher pay, and also teacher recruitment and retention. But however, as a member of the General Assembly, you did not issue or try to attempt to pass any bill or put forward any bill that addressed school safety, raising teacher pay, or teacher recruitment. And my question would be why?
Mr. Superintendent, I was in the legislature from 2003 until 2014. That was 8 years ago. And that's a great example of how out of touch you are in terms of what's happening today. I'm running for state school superintendent today because over the last 8 years, those issues haven't been addressed. Over the last 10 years, teachers have been burnt out. But you know what I did do as a local superintendent? I raised our teacher retention rate from 25% to 75%. That was doing something. When I was a superintendent, I made sure that we closed the achievement gap, bringing our elementary school from 43 to an 85 in our state CCRPI score. And so when it was time for me to take action, that's exactly what I did. And it's one of the reasons why I'm proud to have the support of a number of teachers across the state, those who worked with me when they were at our schools at Ivy Prep, and those who understand what my platform is and know that I see them and the challenges that they face in the classroom, unlike the current state superintendent, who has done absolutely nothing for the last 8 years to stand up for teachers.
Mr. Woods, you get a rebuttal.
Okay. Well, again, during the time you were in the General Assembly, I was actually writing school safety plans down in Irwin County, so it's been in effect for quite a while. When you look at what we've done for teachers over the past eight years, $1,000 retention bonus, which we funded at DOE, funded extended day for our teachers, $5,000 teacher raise, which we looked at. We've also looked at waiving state testing to make sure our teachers were having the time to teach, and we work with the governor and Homeland Security to ensure that we are working and currently work on school safety on a day-in, day-out basis.
Alisha Thomas, Searcy, you get the next question.
Mr. Woods, you've talked on the campaign trail as well about the teacher evaluation law, which I co-sponsored in 2013, but you complained that there are many challenges with the teacher evaluation law. As you know, if you've read the law, and I'm not sure you have, what we did in the legislature was create the framework, and it was up to the Department of Education to actually create the evaluation system. And so if you find so many problems with the teacher evaluation system, why haven't you done anything to make any of those changes that you talk about now in the last 8 years that you've been in office?
Well, actually, I have done something over the past 8 years. Initially, when I came into office, I worked with Senator Tippins, and we worked to repeal many of the things that you helped put in place in the framework that we put in place. What you saw is we had the largest reduction of state-mandated testing. And within that bill itself, again, my opponent helped to set up a situation in which we were going to test every single child in every single course with something that was the student learning objectives. Also in that framework, we had each teacher, no matter what their years of experience or what their experience was, they were going to have to undergo 6 mandated observations throughout the year. And I can tell you as an administrator, but especially as the only person who's been a teacher on the stage, that was a complete waste of time. And we also cut the weight down on that. So we continue to look at that. And right now we actually have a new pilot in which we're going to work and move forward in replacing the teacher evaluation system that I inherited in 2015.
Ms. Thomas, Searcy, you get a rebuttal.
That's the problem. Too little, too late. There are thousands of teachers across the state who are frustrated with the evaluation system that your department implemented. And so you have to stop blaming the legislature and take responsibility. If they are still frustrated, then obviously you didn't do enough. And it's why we need a new state school superintendent who understands the challenges that educators face. I am the only candidate in this race who's actually led schools before. I'm the only one who's actually closed achievement gaps. I'm the only one who's addressed teacher retention. And while we are 6th in the country for teacher shortage, what are you doing? Too little, too late.
All right, that is time for now, and that concludes our second round. For those just joining us, this is the general election debate between candidates for the state school superintendent. And we will now go back to the panel to ask questions of the candidate of their choice until we run out of time. And I will also be a determinant if there is a point that needs to be rebutted. So that is how this will play out. Nicole Carr, you get the first question in this round.
Sure. In the wake of Uvalde, several Georgia school boards are once again tapping into or considering their ability to tap into a 2014 state law that allows them to authorize arming school employees. Which employees are authorized to carry a weapon varies based on whatever the local school boards decide. What do you consider the top factor that school boards must consider when crafting or deciding whether to enact an armed employees policy?
And who is that question to?
We will start with Superintendent Woods.
Well, I think when you look at school safety, it has to be comprehensive. This is, of course, one choice that is given to our local boards of education to put in place. But during this time, one of the things we have been very proactive, working with Governor Kemp to provide funding, for either our schools individually or district-wide. So we have seen that initiated. We continuously work with Homeland Security to make sure that we are having discussions that, how do we better serve our counties and protect our students. And again, any individual that steps on our ground. Right now we are, speaking with the governor and the General Assembly to see if we can, acquire funding for a school resource officer, at each school, and also have a line item of which we can have funding for school safety. One of the things also that we do is that we talk with our building program as we look at new facilities to make sure that we are not causing an impediment to school safety, but how do we sit there and make sure that our schools are very safe, in their construction as an initial basis as well.
Jeff Ame, your turn to ask a question.
This is a question for both The most recent data shows that teachers in Georgia make an average of about $60,000 a year. Is that enough? And if not, how much do you think teachers should make? Why don't we start with Ms. Searcy?
Teacher pay is one of the biggest reasons that teachers are so frustrated in our state. The average starting salary is $39,000 in the state. And so I am deeply concerned about that. And I think it's unacceptable that teachers are having to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. I believe the starting salary for teachers in Georgia should be $65,000 so that they don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs. I also believe that we should address the fact that many of them have student loan debt in an effort to try to make more money. And so I believe that we not only need to address the pay, we need to address their benefits in terms of helping to assist with their loans. And we also, I think, as importantly, have to ensure that we create environments where teachers feel respected and supported. And with those things in balance, I believe that we'll be able to address the teacher shortage that we have, retain those that we have in the classroom, make the teaching profession more respected as it used to be, and attract more candidates so that they will come into our classrooms and teach the children that deserve to have a high-quality education. As a mom, I'm deeply concerned about this, and I need teachers to know that I see you, and this is going to be one of the #1 things on my list when I become state school superintendent.
Mr. Woods, your view on that?
Okay. Well, I think for myself, as again, being a classroom teacher, when I first started, I think base pay was under $16,000. So you can see that, we have taken some steps over the years to make sure that we have increased that pay. I have been very supportive of pay increases across the board. Very thankful of Governor Kemp for the $5,000. One of the things we did as well, we had a $1,000 supplement for retention bonuses for our teachers. One of the things that we desperately need to do is address the pay scale. Right now, that by year 21, that's where our step increase stops. Unless we have a cost of living increase, our teachers see no increase in pay. So I would propose that we extend those steps beyond year 21, and we'll continue to work with the legislature and the governor to make that happen, but also to ensure that our benefits and teacher retirement system are protected.
Nicole Carr.
Ms. Searcy, I actually want to go back to the armed school employees question with you as well. When these districts are deciding to opt into this policy making, their ability to make a policy to arm school employees, what do you think needs to be considered when crafting that policy?
Thank you, Nicole. I think this is such an important issue, and it's something that I'm disappointed that our current superintendent didn't answer. As a parent of 3 school-age children, their safety is the most important thing to me. I will never forget on the day after the Uvalde shooting, asking my daughter how she was feeling, and she said that she didn't think anybody was going to do anything to keep them safe in schools, and it's why I'm running for state school superintendent. I think it is an absolute terrible policy and law to allow employees in school districts to carry guns if they are not law enforcement officials. I am married to a retired state trooper of 26 years. In order for you to be able to carry a gun as a law enforcement officer, you need over 700 hours of training. I want teachers to focus on teaching. I want the other adults in the building to focus on their jobs. And I want children to be safe in our schools. And let's leave law enforcement and physical protection of our students and our educators to the professionals. And I need school boards and our other elected officials who are making these decisions to put children first and make sure that we keep law enforcement in the hands of those who are trained to do so.
Mr. Woods, your view?
Well, I think
Would you like a rebuttal on that?
I guess, well, I'll just add to what we had. Again, as we think about this, we are working day in and day out to make sure our kids are safe. It is a top priority. It is the top priority of what we've been doing. To say that we have been doing nothing is living in a fantasy and a panacea dream world.
My child is not living in a fantasy world. She goes to school every day. And I know you may not have children, so you don't understand that experience, but please do not discount the experience that my daughter is having.
Again, as I look at that, I never said I had children or didn't have children. So again, that's an assumption that you were basing on, some misinformation. But I will say that with the children I have had has been the 1.8 million children in the state of Georgia. And each and every day, their safety is first and foremost. And thankfully, we have not had an incident, but it is something that is ongoing, and we will continue to make sure that all children are safe, even your own.
Jeff Hami, you're up.
This is a question for both, and we'll start with Superintendent Woods. Test scores show that learning suffered during the pandemic. Are there new statewide initiatives that you would support to make up for things students didn't learn during that period? Has the state provided enough guidance to districts on how they should spend their federal COVID-19 relief money to improve learning?
Well, as we look at with the COVID relief funding, what we have found out is that COVID looked different throughout the state. And so I think it's very important that we maintain that flexibility and allowing districts to make that call on how to best catch their kids up. We have, worked with our after-school program to assure funds that support, increased learning there. As we think about, providing, our teachers and even our parents working with GPB to provide online resources, and we continue to develop those resources to support learning across the state. Right now we're in getting ready to adopt new math and reading standards, which actually provide a foundational step that will support early learning reading and math. Something we did not have with Common Core. Something again we had that I had inherited. But was supported by my opponent. So again, making the wrong decisions throughout the years has paid a consequence, and now I've been charged with making sure that we unravel the mess that was created over the years.
Ms. Thomas-Searcy, you're up.
It's so disappointing to continue to hear this superintendent skirt responsibility for 8 years of being in office. Let's talk about the facts. Our districts have received hundreds of millions of dollars of COVID relief funds. They have received no direction, no support from this state school superintendent. That's not just what I'm thinking, that's what I've been told over and over again. During COVID, the most challenging time in public education, arguably in our history, and since we have been alive, and he showed no support, no direction, no guidance. And so, yes, to answer your question, because that's important, state school superintendents should provide guidance to districts. Unfortunately, all of the money that they have received, we don't know what they're spending it on because this superintendent isn't tracking it. The one thing that I would do is institute a universal reading program in our state. There's a reason that Mississippi went from 36 to 26 in reading in our country, and that's because they have a universal literacy program. Every kid in every corner across the state of Georgia should have access to high-quality literacy resources.
Nicole Carr, we are running short on time, so it is all yours, and we'll try and get a short answer from our combatants here.
Sure, and this goes to both candidates here. In line with calls for book banning and more curriculum oversight is a renewed call, largely from the Republican Party, for increased parental rights. What does that mean to you? And we'll start with Superintendent Woods.
Well, I think for myself, not focusing on book banning, but protecting our kids. There's information that our young people need to be protected from. I think, one of the things we find is that there's a lot of pornography out there. And again, the detriment that pornography can have on kids and their social and emotional, outcomes. So again, we want to make sure we are protecting our kids. But our parents, have to be involved in the process. I think we have to be very mindful and respect
and we are at
their
time.
As a parent of 3 school-age children, this is an important issue for me. I'm disappointed with these focus areas on book banning and other things that don't really matter. Mr. Woods is a teacher, and so it feels like he should probably trust our teachers. I want us to know that parents should have options in our public school system. They should be involved in the education system. They should be equal partners. That's what I mean when I say parental rights and being involved in the system.
So that is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Alisha Thomas-Searcy, you get the first closing statement.
I am Alisha Thomas-Searcy. I am your candidate for state school superintendent. I'm a former state legislator, a former superintendent who has a history of getting results. What you do in your past is an indicator of what you will do in the future. We've had 8 years of absolutely nothing. A missing superintendent who's not shown up for districts, not shown up for students, not shown up for parents. I don't have another 4 years. I only have right now. And so I'm asking Georgia voters to think really hard. This is not about Democrat or Republican. This is about who is the person who is experienced, who is passionate, who has the ideas, the vision, the leadership experience, and the track record of getting things done. My daughter said it best. She and the 1.7 million students in this state deserve to have a state school superintendent who will do something. And when I become state school superintendent, I can assure you that I will not leave our children behind in the woods.
Richard Woods, you get the final closing statement.
Well, I just appreciate the Press Club and GPB for hosting this event today. I think it's been somewhat enlightening as we talk about, if the past is any, record of what will happen in the future. Again, my opponent was in the General Assembly on the Education Committee for years and yet did nothing to promote a positive or have a positive impact on education through legislation, period. One of the things you look at that I'll be glad to compare our records. One of the things that we'll be looking at is posting my educational record, but also my educational resume. And I would encourage my opponent to do so. During the past few years, we've come out of COVID-19 and done well. And that's because of the work of our teachers. I've been very supportive from day one of teachers and making sure that they have the time to teach, but also expanding our kids' opportunities to learn. And by doing so, what we now see is that we have a record graduation rate within the state of Georgia, but also beating the national average when it comes to SAT and ACT.
And that
learning continues.
And that concludes our debate. We would like to remind voters that Election Day, Tuesday, November 8th, and early voting begins October 17th. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We also would like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the debates they will host this election season, visit atlantapressclub.org/debates. I'm Jeff Hullinger. Thanks for joining us on this Monday for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk-Young Debate Series.